Hey everyone, and welcome back for a Hump Day edition of Lunch Break Live with me, Ivana. And I think today's Wednesday. I think it's Hump Day. They're all blending together now. But I am joined today by our own Trish Crain. If you are not familiar with Trish, she is our education reporter at AL.com. And Trish wrote a really cool story yesterday. If you haven't seen it, we are going to put the link to that story at the top of the comments on this video so you can check it out. But it was so interesting because Trish talked about how one school system, particularly in the Black Belt area of the state, has turned its school buses into Wi-Fi hotspots. This allows a lot of the students in that area and in that county who don't have internet access at home to be able to access the web, do their homework, and do their assignments and anything else they need to do. And this is a free service for those students. So this kind of can lead to a broader conversation about expanding broadband and internet access across the state and about bridging this homework gap that we keep hearing about. So Trish is here to tell us a little bit about how this works, how this came to be, and to answer some of y'all's questions. If you have any questions about internet access in the Black Belt or in any other region of the state, or about any other schools that are doing this, feel free to let us know in the comments. I have got my phone here. I will be looking down and monitoring y'all's questions and getting them to Trish as appropriate. So Trish, let me throw it to you. Tell us about this school system and what they're doing with their school buses.
Okay, so Perry County is a small school district. It's a large geographical area, as our rural counties usually are. And there are two schools, two K-12 schools, about 1,200 students. It's a shrinking school district, as most of our rural school districts are. And there's no city school district there, so it's just, all county. And when schools closed, they realized at Francis Marion and at the other school, R.C. Hatch, that they really needed to get internet to kids. Like, the instructional packets just weren't going to do it. These were kids, particularly at Francis Marion School, where their school is wired. Great internet signal inside the school, but once they leave school, it's not there. And so until the start of this school year, they had a grant through Apple and with AT&T that provided them connectivity. But at the start of the school year, that grant had ended. So kids went back they had devices, which was good, but they didn't have internet access. So the wheels started moving, gears started turning, and the principal and the superintendent there said, hey, this is something we can do. Let's do this. So they wired 10 buses with Wi-Fi, and then they looked at where they could park them strategically throughout the county, where students could come and access them. And, I should say real quick, they're not the only school district in Alabama, and certainly not the only one in the nation to do it. But I think what made them a little bit different is they had to sort of, ramp this up very quickly and get it going so that it could work in the event or during these pandemic school closures.
And I think it's important to note that you and I and anybody really who is familiar with the Black Belt region or who drives through that region a lot, whether you're commuting or you happen to drive through it on your way to vacation or anything like that, your cell signal can drop out like that in the area, or your Wi-Fi even on your phone. If you have a smartphone and you have that capability, no matter what your device, how good your device is, if you don't have a strong internet connection, especially in that region, you can be very out of luck. And that affects maybe a lot of us who, like I said, just maybe drive through or who stop to do some work there. But we are not familiar with that problem here in Birmingham or in Hoover and in these regions. And that is an area where this is a very, very big deal. And we think about all the things that we do, like we're using right now, our Wi-Fi connection to do this video. And to do our work as reporters, we have to have our Wi-Fi to do. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of people and probably a lot of our viewers to imagine being in an area where you do not have access to Wi-Fi no matter how hard you try, because the lines just are not there.
Right. And I think that, it's a great point. Even on my way there, I was on our morning staff call and I lost the signal and I couldn't, continue on with the staff call as I was driving to Perry County that morning. But I do think that, one of the things that this pandemic has really highlighted, and I think this is why Dr. Mackey and Superintendent Hurd really wanted folks to come out there, is that all of the backup safety net, the school libraries, all of the sorts of things that you might be able, the public libraries, that you might be able to use to fill in those gaps, all of a sudden, they're not there. And, I think Dr. Mackey said it this way. He said, well, the students need to have access as soon as they leave school, as well as having it inside the school.
Right. And I know some people are just joining us. Nancy asked, she said she just got here. What school district is this? Nancy, this is Perry County. And if y'all are just joining us, Perry County is a school district in the Black Belt region. And they have, how about how many students does the county have, Trish?
About 1,200 students. Okay. It's most of the kids are in poverty. Most of the kids are African American. It's a rural school district in every sense of the word. Limited everything. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trish. So this is a pretty, this is a decent sized school district, and the Wi-Fi is just not there. And as Trish was saying a second ago, some of the places where these students typically can get their connection at school, at libraries, those facilities are closed due to COVID. So what the county has done there in Perry County is they have equipped 10 school buses with Wi-Fi hotspot technology. So just in the technical sense, the way this works, and Trish, correct me if I'm wrong, is that these school buses park in different areas across the county. There's one specifically you talked about in your story about that's parked at the volunteer fire department, and students can drive or walk up to the area. The signal reaches, I wrote it down, I think you said about 150 feet from the bus.
Right.
So students can walk or drive up to the area, and they can use that Wi-Fi connection free of charge, and they can get their homework done or get whatever else they need to get done.
Right. Yeah, and that's a game changer for a lot of these students. You think about it, when you're in school and you have access to the internet, and you're, as Dr. Mackey said, almost every homework assignment now requires something from the internet, research or something. So if you can't do that homework at home, how is that learning that you've done, that those teachers, you've put in a full day with students have put in a full day with teachers, and then they go home and can't reinforce any of that learning. So, I think Dr. Mackey saw this again as a chance to elevate this conversation. And, broadband access, we're not the only people talking about this. It's important in schools, but it's important across the whole state. And we are seeing discussions among Alabama lawmakers to really work to expand broadband access, because, if all you have is an internet signal that, download of 3 megs per second, you're not really going to be able to get your homework done very quickly. So this is an issue beyond schools, but this obviously, as an education reporter, I was focused on schools for this story.
Shannon's talking about how Huntsville City Schools is doing this. Yes, Shannon, I think we've heard about that. We'll get into that in just a second about the other schools. But you're right, this is happening across several districts across the state.
Right.
But something that Trish and I had talked about before we started this video was that the access in this area, like we were saying, is very poor. But this was not a free thing to do. This cost a decent bit of money to get these school buses equipped. Can you talk about how much this cost, Trish, and why this money was able to be spent that way?
Well, it was an interesting conversation between Superintendent Hurd. John Hurd is the superintendent in Perry County, and Dr. Mackey, our state superintendent. And they kind of had a back and forth about, Superintendent Hurd reached out to Dr. Mackey and said, hey, we need to do this, but I don't know if we have the money. And the money was $1,500 per bus, which $15,000 in school spending terms, it sounds like not a lot of money. Knowing the $4 billion on education in Alabama just from state funding, but this is not money that was just sitting around. This is a very poor county. And so Dr. Mackey said, do it. We'll worry about how to, get it covered later. You've got to do this for your students. And as federal relief money is coming in now, so he will be able to be reimbursed for some of that, we think. Not for sure, but there was a bunch of federal money that was released to cover expenses related to distance learning in the pandemic. So I'm sure this will probably qualify.
Now, I think that you might have I think I know what you meant, but you said 1,500 at one point. Was it 1,500 or 15,000 per bus?
It was 1,500 per bus, so it was only 15,000 for the whole 10 buses.
Total. Okay.
Yeah, and I had to ask that too because I thought, God, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. Refrigerators cost $1,000 these days, and so it's like, but this is just not money that they had laying around, and basically. I didn't get like a real technical explanation of how it works, but it's kind of like an amplified antenna. And so it, like an extender extends whatever Wi-Fi signal is out there. That's why these buses had to be placed strategically across the county to make sure that they could access, that there was a signal even for them to access, to amplify for the students. Does that make sense?
It does. Kind of like a range extender, a giant range extender.
Yeah.
Now, what are somebody asked in our comments, is there were there discussions on the cybersecurity? Are they worried about somebody hacking into this or accessing anybody's information? We've seen some hackers do this with some of our Zoom or teleconference calls. Is that a conversation that's happening around this connection?
Absolutely. We didn't go into details that day, but yes, it's always a concern, cybersecurity for students particularly. I mean, schools, there's a particular part of the federal internet law that applies to children. And so schools have to already do a bunch of extra things to make sure that children are protected. And, kids are smart. They figure out ways to get around those things. I heard those stories all through my children's career in school, and I'm still hearing them. But they are doing what they can. The discussion on the House floor yesterday, in the House committee, Education Budget Committee, was interesting. They were talking about cybersecurity and the real need to make sure that schools and school districts are protected because we're talking children. Yeah.
Something that I think a lot of people are interested in as well, for the adults that live in this community who aren't students, are there any restrictions on who can show up and use this connection? I know there's up to 50 people that can be on each bus connection at a time, or be using it, not technically on the bus, excuse me. But are there any restrictions as to making sure each person using the signal is a student?
At the point that I did the visit, there was not. The system ID and the password were just taped to the bus door. And when I talked with Dr. Kathy Trimble, who's the principal at Francis Mary, and I checked in with her at the end of last week, because last week was the first full week that they had put the buses out there. So they weren't sure. It's even hard to get the information out there if you don't have the internet, right? How are you going to get notified that you have the internet available here? So they were struggling through some of those communication issues. But she did say that one of the buses that was parked in an apartment complex, they did find that there were a lot of people there at the apartment complex who weren't students that were using it. And she said they were making some adjustments, but she did not go into detail as to what those adjustments were.
Now, I know there's some other people that are interested in our comments about what other school systems are doing this. We've talked about Perry County being one in the Black Belt region. What other school systems across Alabama that you're aware of are having similar programs like this school bus Wi-Fi one?
So I know for sure Montgomery County is doing it. I don't have a good count on how many buses that they had, but Dr. Mackey brought up Montgomery County because he said, look, it's not just rural Alabama. We have places in the inner city, we have places in the suburbs where there may be internet access, but if you don't have the money to purchase it, you're not connected to the internet. And so, most kids have devices these days or have devices available to them, so they might get a cell signal, but they're not getting that high-speed internet that would allow you to sort of flow through your homework, right? Or or to do a Zoom call with your teacher. So he said that 2 of those buses in Montgomery, or 3 of those buses, were parked in the city. So this is not just strictly a rural area, and I think a rural issue. But I think Huntsville City also is doing those buses, and they announced that from the beginning. I'm pretty sure their buses were already equipped with Wi-Fi, because I remember going, wow, when they did it. But Hoover City schools also have buses with Wi-Fi. And, a lot of people might see this as sort of an excess thing, like, why do you need Wi-Fi on buses? But one of the benefits of having Wi-Fi on buses is there are fewer discipline problems, which is interesting. Like, you don't think about that kids, maybe not like throwing things at each other on the bus if they're actually engaged in trying to get their homework done. And some of the kids, like in Perry County, I know they have an hour-long bus ride to school and an hour-long bus ride home from school. Think about our commute time, right? I mean, wouldn't that be nice? I've thought about, wouldn't it be great to have public transit and I could respond to emails on the way into work instead of, fighting through traffic? So there are a lot of benefits to this. But yeah, it's innovative, but yes, it is in use in other places.
I know that somebody, Brian, let us know that Talladega County is also doing this, and
that's right. Yeah.
Thank you for that one, Brian. This is more of a comment than a question, but Lacey is just kind of commiserating, talking about how Macon County needs access, and this is a huge. You're right, Lacey. This is a huge issue in all across Alabama in many different counties. This is an interesting question from our former colleague Josh. Josh asks, how or will the proposed rural broadband expansion impact these school systems and students? And is this bus program the solution, or is something more complicated needed?
Yes to all of those, and I would love to see a big series on broadband expansion, across. I mean, we have this. It's interesting because broadband expansion covers, it crosses through a lot of beats. It's a business issue, it's a employment issue, it's a school issue. I do think that I'm hearing, really over the last couple of years, we've really talked more about from expanding broadband really as a business development issue. When that's really where the conversation has been, because schools, I'm pretty sure that all schools inside the buildings, they have access. But it's once you leave the school building that you may not have access. So hopefully, as Dr. Mackey said, and the reason why they held this, tour for the media was to highlight that this is really needed. And, one of the things that Dr. Trimble said was, she said, our kids have to compete not just with each other, not just across counties, not just across the state or the nation, but globally. And this helps keep them in the game. We've got to help keep young people in the game so that they can go on and, become educated and foster this love for learning, and then, go on and be productive citizens.
Do you have any insight as to whether this program or these parking of the school buses will continue once the school year is technically over here in just a few weeks?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious about that because I'm wondering, is this something that could happen for summer school? Because we know older kids sometimes go to summer school, and, when I think about what the internet did for my children when we went, I can remember struggling many years ago. Can I afford this? Can I invest in this? We've got to have internet. And we were probably one of the early adopters because I live in a city that had it available. It opens up this world, right? And it also, it sparks your curiosity. Like one question leads to another, to another, to another. And when you can actually find the answers to those questions, then it can lead you to continue to want to learn. So I think it has an impact. I know it has its downsides, but it has a good impact on learning.
And so we are to be determined on if this continues.
Yes.
And but it seems like we've gotten a lot of positive reaction to this program, and I'm sure that the people in these areas, whether it is Perry County, Talladega County, Huntsville City, places like that, seems like everybody is overwhelmingly supportive of the program, and that's huge. That's very few people can agree on things these days. So I think that's a big win. Before I let you go, Trish, can you tell us a little bit about this? I know that the reason you stumbled upon this story was through a media tour where Superintendent Mackey was talking about the homework gap. Can you tell us a little bit about the homework gap and explain what that is for those of us maybe who don't have children in education or don't have kids school age and or are not kept up with education issues?
Sure. And homework gap is a term that's been used for many years now. And it really refers to that ability to do your homework on the internet, to connect with the sources, the resources that you need to do your homework once you leave school. And, kids may not have devices at home. They may not have internet access. So it's not just the device and it's not just access. You have to have both. And that's what Dr. Mackey had hoped to highlight was, we can use this time. I also think about, the federal funding that's coming in, and this already a push on rural broadband expansion to say, okay, now look, this is how critical this is. Like, what if we have to, nobody wants to think about having to close schools again, but Dr. Mackey and others are saying, we could have rolling school closures next year. So what do? Just disconnect from kids for a few weeks, take an unplanned 1 month break. We know that what's happened here with schools closing is devastating to learning. Online learning is great, but it can't replace a face-to-face teacher in most circumstances. So this is a chance to say, look, this homework gap already existed, but now we can't even get our regular schoolwork done. Right. So the homework gap, it's really just a matter of having access to the resources that you need once you leave school.
And I can see how this is a perfect illustration of trying to bridge that homework gap, at least in some areas. So, Trish, thank you so much for sharing your insight on this. If you want to know more about this issue, feel free to leave us a comment. I will put you in contact with Trish, or you can read her story that is linked in the comments below. And thank you all so much for joining another day of Lunch Break Live with me. Later on this week, we will talk to a doctor about the remdesivir trial that happened at UAB. We will also talk about small businesses and leading them through this pandemic. So y'all stay tuned this week. And thank you, Trish, again. And for the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow.